This is Bobby. He's a humble CEO, and while he might not have the greatest company culture, he is good at his job. He has made his company a lot of money. He has a small dinghy. He has a few famous friends like MTV award winner Jonah Hill. But one thing Bobby can't get with all that money is love. It turns out, on the way to making all that money, he has upset a few people, and they keep photoshopping him as the devil. This is not good for Bobby's love life, as when all of his dates Google him, this is the first thing that pops up. So, Bobby decides to get out of the business. This single event has spiraled into long-time fans saying that there is no point getting an Xbox. It has had Xbox engineers asking if they will still have a job. So, what is happening?
God, okay, it's happening. Everybody stay calm.
The TLDR is that the Xbox Game Pass is coming to more platforms. Or at least that's what some of the most dedicated fans thought. So, for the small number of you who have no idea what the Xbox Game Pass is, think of it like Netflix but for gaming. So rather than buying each game individually, you pay a £7 a month of subscription, which gets you access to all these games. And they're not all trash. There are some genuinely great games in there. I've been playing RoboQuest and Hi-Fi Rush recently, not to mention others in there like Persona 5 and Palworld. And while there are other alternatives out there like Nvidia GeForce Now, the Game Pass is definitely the best value. I think it's important to address my bias going into this. I don't like exclusives. I think they are bad for consumers. While I understand the business practice behind it, I think consoles should be able to offer more than simply hoarding games away. This entire situation began with Eurogamer's interview of Phil Spencer, the CEO of Xbox, where he said, quote, "We think our games should be available in more places," end quote. While this did cause a stir, there were no specifics, but it wouldn't be long until we found out what that meant, when it was announced that Hi-Fi Rush and Sea of Thieves, a 6-year-old live service game, which were originally exclusive to Xbox and PC, were becoming available on Switch, and while this was met with some pushback, people got over it quickly. However, outrage started to build once again when it was reported by industry insiders that all of Xbox exclusives would be on the table for the PS5, meaning Starfield, Indiana Jones, Gears of War, all of it was up for grabs. These rumours really began to pick up steam when Phil Spencer tweeted out, "We're listening and we hear you. We've been planning a business update for next week where we'll be looking forward to sharing more details with you about our vision for the future of Xbox. Stay tuned." With Cheeto dust in their veins and vindication in their hearts, outraged Xbox fans feared this would be the end. Their argument was, if all of the exclusives are coming to the PS5, then why would I buy an Xbox when I can just get a PS5 and get all the games? So while it might be good for consumers, there's little chance that Sony or Nintendo will be ending their exclusives anytime soon, meaning Xbox are essentially cutting themselves off at the knee. They thought they would lose all their money that they have invested into the platform, and their console would be banished to the annals of history like the Wii U. Thankfully, these users were pulled out of their suicidal spiral when the business update, or podcast as they refer to themselves, went live. The entire podcast is only about 30 minutes long, and it's an interesting listen. Link in the description. But it's worth noting this was made in response to the backlash. So, there are a few lines where they are clearly just talking to the users, and others where they are clearly just talking to the investors. Firstly, it's important to clarify that while 4 previously exclusive games would be making their way onto other platforms, the full Xbox Game Pass will not be. While Phil fails to state which games or which platforms, he did say that 2 were community driven and 2 were smaller games never built to be platform exclusive, but all of them had been on the Game Pass for over a year, and that they were always looking to grow their business in ways without damaging Xbox, while also taking the opportunity to introduce the Xbox to other platforms. Interestingly, despite the name of the company being Xbox, they go on to say,
"It's not about games in service of a device, but rather the devices that people want to play on should be in service of making the games as big and popular as they possibly could be."
Now, I'm not familiar enough with the history of Xbox to determine the truth of this statement, but they are certainly expanding the Xbox service to beyond just the console. Although they say that all of this is in respect to players' purchases, by offering them backwards compatibility to a degree that is unique within the industry, as well as crossplay. That tagline,
play the games you want with the people you want, anywhere you want, when everybody plays, we all win.
But those hardcore fanboys might have had a point, as Phil said he expects the level of exclusives to go down over the next 10 years. If you're sat there scratching your head as to why Xbox is repositioning themselves when they make so much money from their consoles, they have a dedicated following, so why ruin a good thing? I think it comes down to two main reasons.
Grand unveiling of money!
In the aforementioned podcast, they did say that the gaming industry didn't really grow, which seems to be true. According to one report, the gaming industry grew a measly 0.6% in 2023, which might be why we saw Xbox firing 1,900 people. So, there are only really left with two choices: remonetize existing players, or gain access to more players in the space. This is their attempt at the latter, although it was a bit odd that in the same podcast that they say they were firing people for lack of growth, they were also letting us know
the highest level of users on console, the highest level of users on PC, the highest level of users on cloud ever.
I just found it quite amusing. But with all these players, I presume the main reason is that the Xbox Series X and S drastically underperforms when compared to the PS5. While both companies sell these platforms as loss leaders, as an attempt to get you into their respective ecosystems, only one is really successful. Sony sold 22.5 million PS5s in 2023, compared to the measly 7.6 million for the Xbox Series X/S. For the mathematicians at home, that is a 3-to-1 ratio, so only a slight difference between the two. And while the industry didn't grow as a whole, mobile gaming did, increasing to a $188 billion market, and expected to grow a further 9% through to 2028. So, with mobile devices being more powerful, it is now possible to play high-end games on flagship devices without them having to be gaming phones. More people have access to those devices, as well as Xbox's advances into the cloud gaming space, making it perfectly understandable as to why they would want to try and tap into that player base. For those of you who don't know what cloud gaming is, basically, when you play a game, that game is not running from your device, but instead from a third-party server. The idea behind this is to allow low-end spec users to play top-end games at 60 FPS. Anyone with a passing familiarity with the gaming space will have heard of the failure of Google Stadia, and they might be scratching their heads. Google failed to get into the cloud gaming space. It crashed and burned, the only remnants left being a few unsold controllers. So why does Xbox think they can succeed where Google failed? Interestingly, Stadia's vice president stated, quote, "While Stadia's approach to streaming games for consumers was built on a strong technological foundation, it hasn't gained traction with users as we expected," end quote, meaning this company failed on a strategic ground, not on the idea itself. This opinion is also shared by the CFO of Xbox, Tim Stewart, as when the FTC took Microsoft to court, we got access to some interesting documents. One of them being a redacted email to Phil Spencer, in which Tim states that the other competitors in the industry do not have the console strength, the developer engagement, the gaming community, or the catalogue of content that Xbox has. The company is in fact so confident that they were reducing resources to Scarlet, the internal codename for the Xbox Series X/S, in order to reallocate more resources to cloud gaming. While Xbox does not disclose the exact amount they earn from the Game Pass, the FTC has come in clutch once again. Due to the aforementioned court case, we do have some interesting details. So, the average Game Pass generated $9.26 per subscription. We know that there was roughly 25 million subscribers as of January 2022, meaning we can estimate the earning figures of April 2022 to be around 231.5 million Freedom Units, or a respectable £183.2 million. I need to emphasize, this is just 1 month. The Game Pass subscriber count has only continued to grow, with Microsoft confirming on the 18th of January that they have officially surpassed that number. And this isn't even accounting for inflation. It's safe to say they're making a pretty penny from it. It's very understandable as to why they've positioned themselves as the Netflix of gaming. Currently, due to all the acquisitions, Xbox are now one of the largest publishing platforms on the PlayStation, Nintendo, and on mobile. So, if all this infrastructure is already in place, it would make sense for a company to guide that player base towards their leading product. All this leads me to a very interesting question, one which I don't have the answer to, and I would love to hear your opinion on. What is the value proposition of a console? While there will always be a player base for Xbox, either from nostalgia, people who simply like to own their games, or people who can't get a strong and stable internet connection to support their cloud gaming, why would a new user choose the Xbox over a PC? Even with the newest generation being presented as the largest leap forward, why would you ever buy one over a PC? However, it's not just money driving this decision. Allow me to introduce you to the CMA.
With sequence violation 72089.
According to whom?
This is great and all, but why is it Bobby's fault? Well, let me introduce you to the CMA, or Consumer and Markets Authority. It is the British version of America's FTC. It is responsible for strengthening business competition and reducing anti-competitive practices. The Americans at home might have just finished their chicken and waffles or dishwasher salmon. Both equally popular meals, they are just embarrassed about the second, just like they hide the fact that they keep a blender in their sink. I still find that really weird. Anyways, our resident Americans here might have finished their meal and be scratching their heads, hearing thinking, why can some British twat tell my American companies what they can or can't do? This is why we put all of that wonderful tea into the harbour. Well, both Microsoft and Activision Blizzard are global companies, so if they want this purchase to go through and to keep operating in different markets, they need government approval. Big ones are the FTC in America, the European Commission, and the CMA. The CMA are very happy to prevent and even undo mergers. They forced Facebook to sell Giphy, they blocked a merger between Fox and Sky, they stopped another merger between Ryanair and Lingus. This aggressive approach is one of the reasons why Xbox were courting them so much. One of the major concerns going into the case was the fate of Call of Duty. It was deemed to be too big to be under the ownership of a console manufacturer. This led to Xbox signing a deal with Nintendo to bring Call of Duty to the Switch, and trying to sign a deal with Sony to get a decade-long shared ownership contract with them. And yet, despite all this work, the deal failed. There is a long IGN article available in the description if you want a detailed understanding of the reasoning behind it. But, to summarize, while the CMA agreed that the deal would not significantly damage the console market, they had decided to block the purchase over cloud gaming. The CMA is predicting that cloud gaming will become a primary form of gaming in the future, and while games like Call of Duty and World of Warcraft would not be console exclusive, they would instead be exclusive to the Microsoft cloud gaming platform. As, before the purchase, they predicted that between Windows, Game Pass, and Azure, Microsoft would own a 70% of the cloud gaming market. With such a large share under the control, the CMA were concerned that if they allowed the purchase, Microsoft would be able to effectively set and control elements within the market such as pricing and structure, without significant opposition, with no chance of any other company entering the market space and trying to outcompete them because they lacked these enormous games. You might be scratching your head thinking, I know how this story ends. Microsoft throws all that Windows money at some very expensive lawyers, they appeal, and they win. I read the headlines, except their headlines were wrong. To appeal to the CMA, you have to appeal to something called CAT, Competition Appeal Tribunal. CAT, unlike a normal appeals process, rather than checking whether the arguments are sound, they're just making sure that the CMA didn't do anything irrational or illegal. This leads to a very low success rate. I mean, CAT have won 67% of all of their cases since 2010, but Microsoft appealed anyways. However, halfway through the case, they asked a judge for a break, and they put a new deal forward to CAT. Legal processes take time, and while they did approach the CMA first, at the time of the appeal, they had already beaten back the FTC in court, the European Commission agreed with them, And they were getting a deal with Sony so that Activision games would be on the PlayStation for at least a decade. They put all these points forward to the CMA and basically told them to stop being a pain and approve the deal. The CMA basically said Lamau and told them to get lost because they deemed that there was no material change in the deal. With the deadline catching up to them, Microsoft came back with a new deal. They agreed that they would sell the cloud gaming rights for all of Activision's current games and any releases by them over the next 15 years to Ubisoft Plus in perpetuity. This would allow Ubisoft to put World of Warcraft on their cloud gaming platform, although that is a subscription model game, so I'm not entirely sure how it works. This was agreed to, and the appeal case was dropped. This brings us right back to the Xbox Game Pass. While the base version does not offer cloud gaming, the premium version does. With such a high percentage of the market currently being under their belt, there's little doubt in my mind that while they will earn a pretty penny from it selling off these cloud gaming rights, they are more worried about being broken up and forced to sell off either their cloud gaming technology or their gaming portfolio. This risk is made all the worse because Microsoft put themselves in this position with their dominant ownership of the Windows OS, significant cloud infrastructure, and its already robust content library. So it will be interesting to see if Microsoft continue this spree of acquisitions when they have flown so close to the sun. So while some games may be making their way over to other platforms, the Game Pass isn't going anywhere anytime soon. If you've enjoyed this video, why not give it a like and subscribe? If you want to learn about what the staff thought about the disaster that was the day before, why don't you check out this video? Or if you want to learn how Power World is legal, why don't you check out these videos? Bye!